Tonight, North Korea rolls out the red carpet as Russia's President Putin arrives for his first visit in almost a quarter of a century. A warm welcome on the tarmac amid concern in the US over the deepening ties between the two nuclear-armed countries.
The US is calling this trip a sign of desperation by Vladimir Putin, but here at the White House they know they are still struggling to keep him in check.
Also tonight, the British billionaire John Cordwell, who donated $500,000 to the Conservatives at the last election, tells the BBC he is voting Labour for the first time. US police released this mugshot of the pop star Justin Timberlake after he was arrested on drink driving charges in the early hours of this morning. The parents of murdered teenager Stephen Lawrence criticised the decision not to bring criminal charges against 4 retired detectives who led the first investigation into his killing. And why Portugal's captain Ronaldo and his teammate Pepe have made Euros history tonight.
On BBC London, an exclusive interview with a family seeking answers after an 11-year-old girl and her grandfather were hurt on a fairground ride in South London.
Good evening. Russia's President Putin has just arrived in North Korea on his first visit to the secretive state for 24 years. He landed in Pyongyang a short time ago ahead of talks with North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un. The visit underlines the growing relationship between the two nuclear-armed countries, particularly since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And it comes amid accusations from the United States that North Korea has been supplying arms to Russia for use in its war with Ukraine, something Pyongyang denies. Our diplomatic correspondent Paul Adams reflects on the deepening anti-West relationship.
Vladimir Putin's first trip to Pyongyang in almost a quarter of a century, a measure of this relationship's growing importance. A warm welcome from the North Korean leader, two men shunned by much of the world, united in defiance of the West, each bearing a shopping list, their embrace a source of deep anxiety in Washington.
Deepening cooperation between Russia and the DPRK is a trend that should be of great concern to anyone interested in maintaining peace and stability in the Korean Peninsula, upholding the global non-proliferation regime, abiding by the UN Security Council resolutions, and supporting the people of Ukraine as they defend for their freedom and their independence.
For Vladimir Putin, it's all about the war in Ukraine. Russia's economy may already be on a war footing, but Mr. Putin needs every artillery shell and rocket he can get. North Korea is a willing supplier, helping Russia to outgun Ukraine. Before arriving, Mr. Putin praised Kim Jong-un for firmly supporting the war.
North Korea, the regime, shows little regard for human life, even the lives of its own people. So I would not be surprised if Putin and Kim work out a deal for North Korea to send into Russia not only laborers, but also technicians and perhaps even combat troops in the months to come.
The two leaders are drawing ever closer, this their second meeting in less than a year. What's in it for Mr. Kim? Like Russia, his country is under strict international sanctions. The two men, pariahs in arms. But the North Korean leader has his own ambitious plans for nuclear weapons and space technology. A recent spy satellite failed. Russia, for all its limitations, can still offer vital assistance. North Korean TV has firmly set the mood for this high-profile visit. Russian martial music conjuring the sort of patriotic fervour audiences in Pyongyang are used to. And the video screens making the agenda abundantly clear. These are two men under pressure, keen to demonstrate they still have allies and options, and to show the West that for all its sanctions and condemnation, this is a mutually beneficial relationship. Paul Adams, BBC News.
Well, this visit is being closely monitored as far as that's possible by the United States and its allies. In a moment, we will hear from Tom Bateman at the White House. But first, let's go to South Korea. Our correspondent Shaima Khalil is there for us now. And Shaima, you can see from the map we're about to show that these nations they're not just neighbours, they are ever closer allies as well. What is expected to come out of this state visit?
Well, Vladimir Putin arrived very late Pyongyang time, but he has a very busy day ahead of him. He is expected to attend a concert. A parade at the Kim Il-sung Square is being planned. And also he's expected to visit the Trinity of Life Giving Orthodox Church, the only Orthodox church in Pyongyang. And of course, a lot of face-to-face time with the North Korean leader. All of these crucial opportunities to show a united front outside the control of the West, as Mr. Putin put it. But initially at the core of this visit is what these two men can offer each other. Each knows that the other has something that they badly need, as those two strong men have weakening economies and are more isolated on the global stage. North Korea needs everything from food to fuel to foreign currency and technology, satellite technology, after it failed to launch a satellite into orbit in late May. Russia needs to replenish its depleting stockpile as the war in Ukraine goes on. And we know that North Korea can give them that because weaponry in North Korea is based on Soviet-era technology. Despite the denials, we know from the United States and from here in South Korea that North Korean weapons have been used by Russia in Ukraine. There will be limits to what those two men can give each other, but right now they're exploring this growing and deepening relationship.
Shaima, thank you. And Tom Bateman, just give us a sense of how worried the United States is about this deepening relationship.
Well, they say officially they're not concerned about the trip, but it is the relationship itself that is causing anxiety in Washington. I was in the room as the Secretary of State Antony Blinken was with the Secretary General of NATO this afternoon. Mr. Blinken described what he called as what he said was a sign of desperation by Vladimir Putin for having to go to Pyongyang to pick up these, put in the orders effectively for these missiles and artillery shells. But there's something deeper going on here, Sophie, and that is this is a war of attrition now on the front lines in Ukraine. Each side, Moscow and the West, is seeing how far they can wait the other out. And so arms supply is absolutely critical to this. It worries Washington that Mr. Putin is shopping around, not just North Korea, but to the Iranians and crucially also to China, not supplying weapons, but machine tools and components that they say Moscow can use in those weapons. That is a deep worry for the Americans in what is in effect an arms race over Russia and Ukraine. And remember that Washington was stuck at the hurdle of Washington's partisan politics for about 9 months in getting artillery to the Ukrainians. And as for NATO, they're looking at all of this and saying, well, so far many of the sanctions that the West has tried to layer on to Moscow have faltered. They have failed to deliver a killer blow to stop Mr. Putin in what the Americans call his defense industrial base, or in other words, his war machine, as they would put it, here in Washington. And NATO is worried because they're looking at the Americans. They know there's a presidential election down the line. If Donald Trump is elected, any promises made today by President Biden for Ukraine may not be still in place in a year's time.
Tom Bateman, thank you. The British billionaire, entrepreneur and businessman John Caudwell, who gave the Conservatives £500,000 before the last general election, has told the BBC he will vote Labour for the first time in his life next month. The founder of the Phones for You business invited our political editor Chris Mason to his house this afternoon. Well, Chris is with me now. We'll hear what he has to say in a moment. But give us a sense before we do about how important this is, how significant this is. What he has
it's a fair question because ultimately he is only one voter. He only has one vote like anybody else who chooses to vote. I think high-profile endorsements matter to political parties. Well, firstly, because they're better than the alternative, not getting those kind of endorsements. And parties take a particular pride if they manage to nick a previous endorser of their principal rival. And I guess it gives a sense of momentum as well as perhaps permission or reassurance to someone who might be tempted to switch their vote, but seek some sort of reassurance from others before doing so. Now, John Caudwell has been increasingly critical of the Conservatives in recent months, so this hasn't come entirely out of the blue, but nonetheless, it stands out when a guy who is, I mean, bluntly, mega rich and lives in one of the poshest postcodes you could find is switching from the Conservatives to Labour. Wander around Mayfair and it's pretty obvious pretty quickly why it's the priciest spot on the Monopoly board. There are the cars, the houses, even the flowers. And no, I've no idea either how many bulbs there are in that chandelier. Mayfair and the Labour Party are not words that often feature in the same sentence, but the party wants to show off their new supporter and invited me to interview him. The last general election you gave £500,000 to the Conservatives. You're now saying back Labour. Why?
Well, I mean, the reason, of course, for backing the Conservatives was we couldn't possibly stand a Corbyn government. And I'm still exactly the same view there. But what I've witnessed, especially over the last couple of years, is a complete change, getting rid of what I would call the loony left, where extreme socialist policies rather than creating a wealthy Britain. And what I see as a Labour Party committed to GDP growth, committed to the environment, and they are my two big hot buttons, because without GDP growth, you're not going to be able to look after your social services, and without focusing on the environment, there'll be no world to look after.
Tell me about the courtship between the billionaire and the socialist, between you and Keir Starmer.
I don't know whether I'd call it a courtship, to be honest. I mean, I did go to dinner with Tony Blair and Keir in January, but I, up to about 2 or 3 months ago, was completely voteless. You know, my thoughts on Labour historically were very negative. And what I've seen now, the more and more I've looked at Labour, is a transformation.
Is this going to be the first time you'll have voted Labour?
First time in 51 years, yes. And honestly, it took a lot of me soul searching to be able to make that. Because I guess you
voted for the Conservatives a lot in the past, is that right?
Yeah, and it wasn't really because it was the Conservative Party. It's the Conservative principles I believe in. I believe in wealth creation. I believe in protecting the poor, but by making money within the UK, because we can't create money out of thin air. We can't tax rich people in order to help the poor, because they'll go off to Monaco and other places. We have to create real, genuine wealth.
What, in your view, has gone wrong for the Conservatives? Is Rishi Sunak a dud?
Oh, absolute dud.
Why?
I mean, a complete dud. Well, if you go back to his chancellorship, everything he did within COVID was wrong.
He would argue he gave lots and lots of people the money needed to feed their family.
All the criticisms that I made of Rishi during his chancellorship, I think were pretty much evidenced in the D-Day situation, where a complete lack of judgment.
Are you going to join the Labour Party? Will you consider giving money to them in the way that you have to the Conservatives in the past?
The Labour Party, in my estimation, as much as I disagree with some of the policies, are the absolute very best for Britain going forward. It's quite possible I might support them financially if they needed it next time round, if I think they've done an amazing job.
It's nice to talk to you, and thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure, thank you.
So, Chris, that was this afternoon. What's been the reaction to that?
Well, Labour, as you might expect, are excited. Conservatives not saying anything formally. One senior figure observing to me tonight, though, that Mr Caldwell is not particularly keen on, as they put it, one of the few policies Labour have actually announced, rather archly referring that to Labour's plans to put VAT on private school fields, which Mr Caldwell has been critical of. Just to broaden out in terms of where we find ourselves, a couple of weeks out now, there's been an opinion poll tonight by Ipsos. It's one of these MRP polls, as they're known, that look at they try and imagine what the results will be in each constituency, around 20,000 people polled. It suggests that Labour is on course for the biggest majority of any government since the Second World War, suggesting a majority of 256, which is absolutely colossal, and the Conservatives reduced to about 115, the Liberal Democrats as the third party, and the SNP as the fourth. Obviously, polls come and go, but there have been quite a few polls that are not a million miles away from those kind of numbers recently. As for how the Conservatives respond to all of this stuff, whether it be the poll or endorsements or whatever else, I suspect they're going to keep on hammering away at what they see as a awkward dividing line for Labour around the whole question of tax and tax cuts, and constantly asking Labour, would you rule out a tax on X? They think that is being noticed. They think it is awkward for Labour. I think they will carry on doing it at least for the next couple of days, and probably all the way through the rest of the campaign.
Chris Mason, our political editor. Thank you. The parents of the murdered black teenager Stephen Lawrence have strongly criticised a decision by the Crown Prosecution Service not to bring criminal charges against 4 retired detectives who led the original investigation into his death in 1993. The 18-year-old was murdered by a racist gang in South London. Only 2 of his 5 or 6 killers have been brought to justice. Stephen's mother, Baroness Doreen Lawrence, said the decision marked a new low in the way her family have been treated by the criminal justice system over the past 30 years. Daniel de Simone reports.
The racist murder of teenager Stephen Lawrence took place 31 years ago at a South London bus stop.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it?
Now! The failed first investigation is widely seen as one of the biggest disasters in the history of the Metropolitan Police. Today, an official review has concluded that 4 senior retired officers who ran the first inquiry should not be charged with misconduct in a public office for their investigative failures. Stephen's father says he's saddened by the decision.
I'm really disappointed about that because I felt that there was enough evidence there from early to suggest that these people weren't doing their jobs in the right and proper way.
2 of the 4 retired officers were Bill Ilsley and Ian Crampton, seen here after being criticised by a landmark public inquiry 25 years ago. The others were Brian Whedon and Ben Bullock. Prosecutions for misconduct in a public office in historic cases like this are rare. The evidential bar for criminal charges is high, but even the Met itself now accepts the first murder investigation was a failure, the effects of which are still being felt. Last year, the BBC publicly identified a 6th suspect in the murder, Matthew White, who died in 2021, and exposed a series of failures relating to him. But these were not part of the case against any of the 4 retired officers. Stephen's mother, Baroness Doreen Lawrence, said in a statement this showed a shallow inquiry had taken place and the many failings were unforgivable. I am bewildered, disappointed and angry at the decision, she said. 2 of the prime suspects were eventually convicted of murder in 2012, but others responsible remain free. In April, following the BBC's investigations, an official review by another force of the closed murder investigation was ordered. The breadth of that review is being worked out, but it means there remains a prospect of further justice for Stephen Lawrence.
Well, Daniel joins me now. It's so difficult for Stephen Lawrence's family. This has been going on for such a long time, more than 3 decades. What happens now?
Well, in terms of attempts to hold Met police officers criminally responsible for failures in the case, that at the moment is at an end. In terms of the murder investigation itself, the Met stopped investigating 4 years ago, but following our revelations on the BBC over the past year and calls by Baroness Doreen Lawrence for the case to be reopened, a review of the murder investigation, whether it could be reopened and whether there's anything more that can be done, was ordered in April, and there's a process that's been ongoing since then, a negotiation between the family and the Met about the parameters of that review. The Met knows, because they were ordered by the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, that it has to be acceptable to the Lawrence family, that the force that's going to do it has to be acceptable, and the review must be serious. It just can't be a whitewash. It has to be a serious review and attempt to bring the others responsible to justice. So I don't think we'll know yet for a few weeks what the review will look at, but I think the Met know that if it's not serious, it will not have the family's support.
Daniel, thank you. The pop star Justin Timberlake has appeared in court in New York State charged with drink driving. The singer, who was arrested in the early hours of this morning in the Hamptons, has been released on bail. He's currently on tour and is due in the UK this summer. Our correspondent Neda Tawfik is in New York for us tonight. Neda, tell us more about what's happened.
Yeah, well, Sophie, this is Justin Timberlake's first tour in 5 years, but it's his personal life that is dominating the headlines. Police have just released his mugshot. There's also images online circulating showing him in handcuffs and later being let out by his lawyer as he wears a baseball cap and sunglasses. And look, this all happened Monday night when he was out in the Hamptons, a popular New York beach destination where celebrities flock in the summer, and he was out with friends when he left a restaurant. And police noticed his BMW had ran a stop sign, was swerving in the road, and pulled him over. And according to court documents, Justin Timberlake's eyes were glassy, bloodshot, his speech was slowed, and his breath smelled strongly of alcohol. He told the officer that he had just one martini, but the officer ultimately arrested him and held him in custody until his court appearance today, where he was formally charged and then released without bail. Now, we haven't had a comment from Justin Timberlake. His lawyer says he will defend him vigorously, but these, of course, are serious charges. He faces fines, a suspended license, and potentially up to a year in prison. His next court appearance is going to be July 26th. He's expected to appear virtually. Sophie.
Neda, thank you. The computer chip maker Nvidia has become the world's most valuable company after its share price climbed to an all-time high today, making it more valuable than Microsoft. The market now values the company at more than $3 trillion. The company makes computer chips that are used in artificial intelligence software. The actor Sir Ian McKellen, who is 85, says he is looking forward to returning to work and is hugely indebted to NHS staff who treated him after he fell from the stage in London last night. The producers of the show Player Kings have said that the play has been postponed for another day and will now return on Thursday, and that Sir Ian will perform again, but when he is ready. An independent accountant brought in by the Post Office to investigate its Horizon IT system more than a decade ago has told the inquiry that he had felt he was dealing with a cover-up and possibly a criminal conspiracy. Ian Henderson was sacked alongside another forensic accountant in 2015. He says he believes it was because they were getting too close to the truth in their investigation. Our business correspondent Emma Simpson reports.
For many, these two are among the heroes of this story.
Morning. We've been waiting 12 years for this.
Ron Warmington and Ian Henderson, the forensic accountants brought in to investigate Horizon, but were later sacked.
The 7 named post office.
In the TV drama, they were played by just one character, called Bob.
Documents that I found in the post office files. Beyond belief.
Going to tell me more?
I do solemnly.
They had plenty to tell the inquiry today.
The people at the top knew that they were dealing with an existential issue.
He said the Post Office went from sharing their commitment of seeking the truth to the worst corporate behaviour he'd ever come across.
It was awful, just dealing with people who were not just seemingly failing to understand just about everything we said, but were in a sort of cabal that was colluding to thwart every move that we made.
His partner said he believed the Post Office felt it was above the law and that decisions were driven by PR.
Post Office senior management were very concerned about the public perception, the brand image. I mean, Paula Reynolds in meetings was very open about it.
Mr. Henderson looked at Joe Hamilton's case, one of the first files he picked up.
I think we didn't trust them in the beginning, but they're amazing.
I haven't got that money.
Here she is in the drama, the losses piling up, accused of stealing. The Post Office said they'd drop the theft charge if she pleaded guilty to false accounting. She did, but Second Sight found out there was no evidence of theft. And today we heard how the Post Office didn't want the document to be revealed.
It's shocking, isn't it? It doesn't get much worse. And then they had the document which wasn't privileged at the time, and then they slapped privilege on it, and, you know...
it disappeared.
Yeah, it disappeared.
In his evidence, Ian Henderson said former Post Office boss Paula Reynolds consistently attempted to steer them away from investigating potential miscarriages of justice. They had various legal threats and were gagged. But in the end, their work helped uncover the scandal. Emma Simpson, BBC News, at the Post Office inquiry.
The former footballer Joey Barton has apologised to the Radio 2 presenter Jeremy Vine and agreed to pay him £75,000 in damages for making defamatory comments on social media. Jeremy Vine sued him for libel and harassment over 14 posts on Twitter, now known as X. Our correspondent Francis Reid is here, and just tell us how this all began.
Well, this all started when Joey Barton published a series of posts to his 2.8 million followers describing two female pundits as the Fred and Rose West of football commentary. Now, Jeremy Vine is very active on that particular social media platform, and he responded to Mr. Barton's post by asking if he had a brain injury. That then prompted a series of angry posts from Joey Barton, which falsely accused Jeremy Vine as having a sexual interest in children. Jeremy Vine took legal action, and a judge ruled it was seriously defamatory on 11 counts. Now, today, Joey Barton has apologised on X. He said in a statement that he recognised it was a very serious allegation and that it was untrue, and he said that he wished to set the record straight. Joey Barton also admitted he had taunted and abused Jeremy Vine for bringing a legal complaint against him. Now, Mr. Barton says he has agreed not to make the same allegations again, and the statement, he apologised for the distress he caused, and he's agreed to pay Mr. Vine £75,000 in damages and legal costs.
Francis, thank you. Football now, and history has been made tonight by two of Portugal's players. The team's captain, Cristiano Ronaldo, is playing in a record 6th European Football Championship. Portugal have just been playing the Czech Republic tonight, while earlier Georgia made their Euros debut against Turkey. Joe Wilson was watching all the action.
Can you imagine the Euros never grows old? This is all new for Georgia. For the first time, part of the Euros. Proud, native Dortmund Stadium.
Ahead of their match against Switzerland.
If the manager gives me the opportunity to play on Wednesday night, it's got to be a completely new version of myself and the team as a whole. They have got top players around the team, but so do we, and it's up to us to go and show that.
Griezmann in. Scotland can recover from that figurative bloody nose against Germany, but French can during their win last night. The World Cup winner won't need surgery, but if he plays in... Despite that, France can now breathe easy. Scotland needs to improve or they'll blow their chances of staying in the Euros. Jane Dougal, BBC News, Cologne.
Weather now, Matt Taylor is here. Hello.
Hello. Our weather is at last on the change, Sophie. Bit of good news. But partly because of what's happening on the other side of the Atlantic. Let me take you to United States. A heat wave is starting to build, and what a heat wave it is as well. Over 70 million people under extreme heat warnings. Daytime temperatures into the high 30s. Humidity off the scale, though, making it feel like it's the low 40s for a number of days on end. Now, that heat's not coming our way, but the hot, humid weather across to the east is clashing with cooler air in the west, and that is firing up the jet stream, which is sending ripples across the atmosphere, and at last it's set to move our jet stream from the south of us to the north of us. That helps to draw in a big area of high pressure, so drier, sunnier and warmer, particularly from Sunday onwards. That shows on our forecast chart from Saturday and beyond. Temperatures at, if not above, levels we normally expect this time of year. Though Saturday will be a few storms and a few blips on the horizon to get us there, first of all, because tonight, temperature-wise, still a chilly one across Scotland, Northern Ireland. Could see temperatures down into lower single figures, but otherwise, lovely start to Wednesday. Variable amounts of clouds, some good sunny spells, small chance of a light shower here and there, but most will be dry. Greatest chance of some wetter weather later in the day into the northwest of Scotland. Here, temperatures still a bit suppressed at 11 to 14 degrees, but warmer elsewhere across Scotland, Northern Ireland, as you were over the past few days. Strong sunshine, high if not very high pollen levels across England and Wales. Into Thursday now, and another cool start. Bit more clouds to the north and west. Greater chance of a few spots of rain western Scotland, Northern Ireland later. Best of the sunshine to the south and east, where temperatures continue just to climb up a little bit. But here's that next little blip on the horizon, in that as we go through Friday night into Saturday, this weather front will bring some heavy rain late in the day and through the night. Good news for the garden, I suppose. Rain by night, a few storms on Saturday morning. But other than that, the sunshine will then become more dominant as we see the weekend out and into next week. Sophie.
Matt, thank you. And that's it from us on BBC One. It is time now for the news where you are. Good night.